I used to believe that success was a shield, that the higher you climbed, the safer you became. Looking back now, I realize how that delusion nearly destroyed everything I'd built. My name is Sophia Chen, and until 6 months ago, I was living what most would call the American dream. Executive financial analyst at Morgan Stanley, married to a rising star architect, and owner of a stunning brownstone in Brooklyn Heights with a view that made my colleagues seethe with envy. That Tuesday morning started like any other, with Eric's arms wrapped around me as I stood at our kitchen island, sipping my signature extra-hot oat milk latte. The autumn sun painted golden streaks across our marble countertops, and the scent of his cologne, the one I'd gifted him for our 5th anniversary, mingled with the coffee's rich aroma. "You're going to crush that Henderson merger presentation," he murmured into my hair, his architect's hands sliding down to my waist. "Though I still think you work too hard, Mrs. Chen Reynolds." I smiled, letting myself melt into his embrace for just a moment longer. Says the man who spent all weekend hunched over his drafting table. I turned to face him, straightening his tie, midnight blue silk, matching his eyes perfectly. "How's the new project coming along?" A flicker, something so subtle I would have missed it if I hadn't spent the last 7 years memorizing every micro-expression that crossed his face. His smile remained, but his eyes, they shifted away for just a fraction of a second. "Actually, we just landed a major contract. The client wants to keep it under wraps for now, but trust me, Sophia, this could be huge for the firm." I nodded, pride swelling in my chest even as that tiny flicker nagged at the edges of my consciousness. Eric had worked his way up from nothing, just like me. Two ambitious souls who found each other at a charity gala, bonding over shared dreams and a mutual disdain for the silver spoon crowd that dominated our industries. "Tell me more over dinner tonight," I suggested, gathering my portfolio. "No boo. 8 o'clock. Can't tonight, babe. Client meeting ran late yesterday, so we're playing catch-up at the office." Rain check. Another flicker. This time in his voice. But I pushed it aside, chalking it up to the pressure of his new project. We'd built our relationship on trust and understanding, both of us knew the sacrifices required to reach the top. If only I'd known then that trust would be the very thing to unravel everything. The Henderson merger had consumed my life for the past 3 months. As lead analyst, I'd spent countless nights poring over financial statements, market projections, and confidential data that could make or break the entire deal. The presentation that morning went flawlessly, until I noticed something odd in the Q&A session. James Green, my direct superior, asked a question about our competitive analysis that made my blood run cold. Not because of the question itself, but because of its specificity. He referenced figures that weren't in the public domain, numbers I'd only shared with Eric during our late-night strategy sessions. "Interesting perspective, Mr. Green," I said smoothly, maintaining my professional mask even as alarm bells started ringing in my head. "Though I'm curious about your source for those projections." He smiled, that shark-like grin that had always set my teeth on edge. "Just doing my due diligence, Sophia. We can't be too careful with a deal this size." The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and emails, but my mind kept circling back to that moment. I found myself pulling up news articles about recent architectural contracts, scanning for anything involving our competitors. What I found made my stomach churn. Vertex Developments, our biggest rival in the Henderson deal, had just announced a mysterious new partnership with an up-and-coming architectural firm. The press release was maddeningly vague, but one detail jumped out: the project's proposed location matched perfectly with confidential site plans I discussed with Eric just last month. That evening, I sat alone in my office long after everyone else had gone home, staring at my computer screen until the words blurred together. My phone buzzed, a text from Eric. "Working late again. Don't wait up. Love you." I opened our photo gallery, scrolling through images of our life together. Vacation in Bali. Christmas in Aspen. The surprise party he threw for my promotion last year. Each perfect moment now seemed to take on a different hue, like sunlight through stained glass suddenly revealing hidden patterns. I pulled up my personal financial records, something I hadn't bothered to check in months. Trust. That's what marriage was about, right? But as I dug deeper, cross-referencing dates and transactions, my hands began to shake. Large transfers to accounts I didn't recognize. Investment withdrawals I never authorized. And most damning of all, a series of meetings scheduled in Eric's calendar with names that appeared frequently in my confidential merger documents. The golden light that had filled our kitchen that morning was long gone, replaced by the harsh fluorescent glare of my office. I caught my reflection in the window, successful, powerful Sophia Chin Reynolds, whose perfectly curated life was about to shatter like a champagne flute dropped from our penthouse terrace. My phone buzzed again. Eric. Actually managed to wrap up early. Heading home now. Chinese takeout. I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Everything in me wanted to confront him, to demand answers, to scream and rage at the betrayal taking shape before my eyes. Instead, I typed. Perfect. See you soon. Because if there's one thing I'd learned in the cutthroat world of high finance, it's that information is power. And before I confronted my husband about his apparent double-cross, I needed to know exactly how deep this betrayal went. I gathered my things, my heels clicking against the marble floor with renewed purpose. Let him think everything was normal. Let him believe his wife was still blissfully ignorant of the knives he'd planted in her back. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection again. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who'd started her day in Eric's loving embrace. Her eyes held something new, something cold and calculating that matched the steel and glass surrounding us. The doors closed, and I smiled. If Eric wanted to play games with our life's work, he was about to learn that he wasn't the only one who knew how to keep secrets. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a descent into a web of lies that would test not just my marriage, but everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the price of success. The Chinese takeout containers sat between us like a minefield, each innocuous white box a potential trigger for the explosion I knew was coming. Eric was talking about his day, his voice carrying the same warm timbre that had first drawn me in at that charity gala 7 years ago. But now, each word seemed to echo with hollow undertones, like footsteps in an empty vault. The client loves the preliminary designs, he was saying, chopsticks paused midair. We might even be able to break ground ahead of schedule. I watched him carefully, cataloging every micro-expression like entries in a ledger. The slight tension around his eyes. The way his left hand kept straying to his neck, his tell when he was nervous, though I'd never told him I'd noticed. Vertex Developments seems to be moving quickly these days, I said casually, taking a sip of wine. The Cabernet, his favorite, felt bitter on my tongue. The chopsticks froze. Just for a millisecond, but in that frozen moment, I saw our entire marriage crystallize into something brittle and cold. Oh. His recovery was smooth, but I'd already seen the fracture lines. I hadn't heard. Hadn't heard. I set my wine glass down with deliberate precision. That's interesting, considering they're your new client. The silence that followed was deafening. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, watching him calculate odds and weigh options like I did with market projections every day. The irony wasn't lost on me, we were more alike than I'd realized, just not in the ways I'd always thought. Sophia. He set his chopsticks down, and for a moment, I saw genuine fear flash across his face. It's not what you think. Really? My laugh sounded foreign to my own ears, sharp and crystalline, like breaking glass. Because I think my husband has been selling my confidential information to our competitors. I think the man I trusted with everything has been systematically betraying me for months. Please, Eric, tell me what part of that I'm misunderstanding. I had no choice. The words exploded from him with such force that the wine glasses rattled. You don't understand, they came to me. They knew everything, Sophia. Everything. What are you talking about? The ice in my voice matched the cold dread spreading through my chest. Eric's face crumpled, and in that moment, he aged a decade before my eyes. The gambling debts. I tried to handle it myself, I swear. But they found out somehow. Said they'd expose everything, ruin both our careers unless I helped them. The room seemed to tilt on its axis. Gambling debts? What gambling debts? He couldn't meet my eyes anymore. It started small. Just a few games with clients, keeping up appearances. But then I lost big. Really big. I borrowed money to cover it, thinking I could win it back. But it just kept getting worse. How much? When he didn't answer, I slammed my hand on the table. How much? 3.5 million. The numbers hit me like a physical blow. I found myself doing mental calculations, our savings, my bonuses, the equity in our home. None of it would be enough. Why didn't you come to me? My voice cracked, raw emotion bleeding through my carefully constructed facade. We could have figured something out. Instead, you chose to betray everything we've built. I couldn't bear for you to see me like that. His laugh was hollow. The failure. The disappointment. You're so perfect, Sophia. Always in control. Always successful. I wanted to fix it before you ever had to know. Perfect. The word tasted like ash. You think I'm perfect? I trusted you. I shared everything with you. And you used that trust to dig us both into a grave. I stood up, needing to move, to think. The city lights sparkled beyond our windows, the same view I'd once found so enchanting now seemed to mock me with its illusion of success. Who else knows? I demanded. Who are you working with? Eric's hesitation told me everything. James Green approached me first. Said he could make the debts disappear if I helped them get an edge on the Henderson deal. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Green's suspicious questions. The mysterious meetings. The whole time, my own superior had been orchestrating my downfall. How long has this been going on? 6 months. Eric's voice was barely a whisper. But Sophia, we can still fix this. I have a plan. We. The word felt like poison. There is no we anymore, Eric. You destroyed that the moment you decided to gamble with our future. I moved to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. My reflection stared back at me, overlaid against the glittering cityscape, a woman I barely recognized anymore. I need you to tell me everything, I said finally, not turning around. Every detail. Every meeting. Every piece of information you passed along. And then we're going to figure out exactly how deep this conspiracy goes. What are you going to do? Now I did turn, and whatever Eric saw in my expression made him physically recoil. I'm going to do what I do best, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. I'm going to analyze the situation, identify the weaknesses, and then I'm going to systematically dismantle every person involved in this scheme. Including you, if necessary. Sophia, please. You have one chance, Eric. One chance to help me make this right. Otherwise, I'll burn everything down myself and let the truth scatter like ashes. As I watched my husband's face crumple with the weight of his guilt, a strange calm settled over me. The perfect life I'd thought we had was already gone, shattered beyond repair. But from these sharp-edged pieces, I would build something new, something stronger, forged in the fire of betrayal. Eric opened his mouth to speak, but was interrupted by the chime of my phone. A text from James Green. Need to discuss the Henderson projections first thing tomorrow. Bring the updated figures. I smiled, and this time, it matched the coldness in my heart. Tomorrow, the game would begin in earnest. And I intended to play for keeps. Sleep never came that night. I lay in our guest bedroom, watching shadows dance across unfamiliar walls, each hour marked by the soft ping of emails arriving on my phone. Eric's confessions had unleashed an avalanche of revelations, each one a poisoned arrow finding its mark in the corpse of our marriage. Dawn found me at my vanity, applying war paint with surgical precision. The woman in the mirror was a stranger, someone harder, someone dangerous. Dark circles beneath my eyes testified to my sleepless night, but there was something else there too, a predatory gleam that reminded me of James Green's shark-like smile. I was becoming what I despised, and the most terrifying part was how natural it felt. "I've written down everything," Eric said from the doorway, his voice rough with exhaustion. He held out a leather-bound notebook, the one I'd given him for Christmas last year. How fitting that it would now contain the blueprint of our destruction. I took it without looking at him, the leather cool against my fingertips. "You're sure this is everything?" "Every meeting, every contact, every piece of information they requested." He hesitated, shifting his weight. "Sophia, about last night." "Don't." The word cut through the air like a blade. "We're past apologies now. The only thing that matters is fixing this before we both end up in federal prison." His reflection flinched at the word prison, and I felt a twisted satisfaction. Let him taste the fear that had been my constant companion since discovering his betrayal. The Morgan Stanley offices seemed different now, transformed from a temple of success into a labyrinth of secrets. Every greeting, every casual conversation vibrated with potential hidden meanings. I found myself cataloging micro-expressions, analyzing tone patterns, building a mental database of who knew what and who might be involved. James Green was waiting in my office. "Sophia." His smile was as artificial as the orchids he kept on his desk. "I trust you have those updated projections." I met his gaze with practiced neutrality, my mind racing through the information Eric had provided. Green wasn't just a conspirator, he was the architect of this whole scheme. He'd been watching me for months, using Eric's weakness to orchestrate my downfall. "Actually, James, I wanted to discuss something interesting I discovered in the competitive analysis." I pulled up a carefully doctored spreadsheet on my monitor. "These patterns in Vertex's recent acquisitions, they seem almost prescient." The trap was baited. I watched him study the numbers, noting how his left eye twitched slightly, the same tell I'd observed during tense board meetings. "Fascinating," he murmured, but I caught the undercurrent of tension in his voice. "Though I'm not sure what you're suggesting." "Oh, I'm not suggesting anything." I leaned back, channeling the ice-cold calm that had settled into my bones. "I just find it remarkable how certain parties seem to anticipate market movements with such accuracy." Our eyes locked in a silent battle of wills. In that moment, I understood something fundamental about power. It wasn't about who held the most cards, but about who could maintain the illusion of control longest. "Be careful, Sophia." His tone was light, but the threat was clear. "Sometimes analyzing patterns too closely can lead to unfortunate conclusions." "Funny, I was about to say the same thing to you." He left shortly after, but the air in my office remained charged with unspoken dangers. I opened Eric's notebook, my hands steadied despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Page after page of detailed notes revealed a conspiracy more extensive than I'd imagined. Green wasn't working alone, there was a whole network of players manipulating markets, trading information, profiting from the betrayal of trust. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Coffee? We need to talk." Marcus Wong, SEC Enforcement. The name hit me like a thunderbolt. Marcus Wong, the legendary SEC investigator known for bringing down some of Wall Street's biggest insider trading rings. How long had he been watching? What did he know? I thought of Eric, probably sitting in his office right now, drowning in guilt and fear. I thought of Green, smugly confident in his web of manipulation. I thought of our brownstone, our vacation photos, our carefully crafted life, all of it built on a foundation of lies. The SEC message was both a threat and an opportunity. If Wong was investigating, the whole house of cards could collapse at any moment. But perhaps there was a way to use this to my advantage. I picked up my phone, fingers hovering over the keys. One reply could set in motion a chain of events that would either save us or destroy us completely. The weight of the decision pressed down on me like a physical force. In the reflection of my darkened monitor, I caught a glimpse of myself, poised, professional, perfectly put together. But beneath that carefully maintained exterior, something wild and dangerous was taking root. I was no longer just fighting to save my career or my reputation. I was fighting for survival, and I was beginning to understand that survival sometimes required becoming the very thing you feared most. I typed my response to Wong, Plaza Hotel. Noon tomorrow. Come alone. The die was cast. Now I just had to figure out how to play all these pieces against each other without getting crushed in the process. As I sat there, surrounded by the trappings of success that had once meant everything to me, I felt a strange sense of liberation. When you have nothing left to lose, you become capable of anything. My computer chimed with a new email from Green, emergency board meeting tomorrow afternoon. Bring the Henderson files. I smiled, knowing that the files I would bring would contain carefully crafted poison pills, data that would appear normal at first glance but would unravel under scrutiny. The question was, who would discover them first? Green's conspirators, or the SEC? The game was becoming more complex by the hour, and I was learning to love the intricate dance of deception. After all, isn't that what they had taught me? Trust was for fools, and I had been the biggest fool of all. But not anymore. Never again. The Plaza Hotel's Oak Room had always represented a certain kind of power, old money, gilt-edged and respectable. Now, as I sat waiting for Marcus Wong, it felt more like a luxurious trap, its polished surfaces reflecting back fractured versions of myself. Each mirror caught a different angle of the woman I was becoming, calculate, dangerous, unbound by the conventional morality that had once defined my existence. The maitre d' approached with a man whose appearance defied every expectation I'd constructed. Marcus Wong wasn't the stern-faced bureaucrat I'd imagined, but rather a study in calculated casualness, his slightly rumpled Brooks Brothers suit and wire-rimmed glasses crafted to disarm, to encourage underestimation. I recognized the strategy because it was one I'd employed myself, though never with such artful precision. Mrs. Chen Reynolds. His handshake was firm, his eyes sharp behind those deceptively modest glasses. Thank you for meeting me. Just Ms. Chen, actually. The words tasted like bitter medicine, necessary but unpleasant. Recent developments have made the hyphenation obsolete. Something flickered in his expression, satisfaction perhaps, or confirmation of a theory long held. He ordered green tea while I requested a double espresso. The caffeine had become my constant companion these sleepless nights, burning away the fog of exhaustion and emotional turmoil. You've been watching us for months, haven't you? I didn't bother with preliminaries. Time had become a luxury I could no longer afford. Longer. He stirred his tea with meticulous precision. The patterns emerged about a year ago. Subtle at first, the kind of market movements that could be dismissed as fortunate timing. But patterns have a way of becoming clear to those who know where to look. The timeline hit me like a physical blow. A year. Eric's betrayal stretched back further than even his confessions had revealed. Each lie's by omission was another shard of glass in my heart, drawing fresh blood. And you're approaching me now because you're the wild card, Ms. Chen. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. The one variable none of them properly accounted for. Green, Vertex, the whole network, they thought they could control you through your husband. But they didn't understand what they were dealing with, did they? A hollow laugh escaped me. And you do? I understand that a woman who built herself from nothing, who climbed to the top of Morgan Stanley through sheer brilliance and will, isn't someone who takes betrayal lightly. His smile was razor-thin. I understand that you've spent the last 48 hours systematically preparing to burn down everything they've built. The truth of his words resonated through me like a struck bell. I had been transformed, molecule by molecule, into something new, something forged in the crucible of betrayal and tempered by rage. What exactly are you offering, Mr. Wong? Partnership. He slid a manila envelope across the table. The SEC has been building a case, but we need someone on the inside. Someone with access to the right documents, the right meetings, the right conversations. I opened the envelope, my hand steady despite the tremors in my soul. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Eric at clandestine meetings. Green passing documents in darkened parking garages. Vertex executives in private clubs. But it was the last photo that stopped my breath, Eric and a woman I didn't recognize, intimately entwined outside a hotel that wasn't ours. When? The word emerged as barely more than a whisper. 3 months ago. The Mandarin Oriental. Wong's voice held something almost like compassion. We believe she's connected to Vertex's legal team. Whether the relationship was genuine or just another layer of manipulation, well, that's harder to determine. The room seemed to tilt on its axis, the elegant decor blurring into meaningless shapes. I had thought myself emptied of the capacity for further pain, but this new betrayal carved fresh wounds into my psyche. The woman in the photo was everything I wasn't: soft, blonde, younger. A living embodiment of every insecurity I'd ever buried beneath achievements and accolades. Why show me this? Because you need to understand the full scope of what you're dealing with. Wong's eyes met mine with unwavering intensity. These people, they don't just break laws, they break lives. They take everything that's genuine and twist it into something corrupt. Your husband's gambling debts. They engineered those too. Created situations where he'd feel compelled to play, ensured he'd lose big, then positioned themselves as his only salvation. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Every aspect of my life's destruction had been orchestrated, choreographed like some perverse ballet. I wasn't just a victim of circumstance or weakness, I was the target of a calculated campaign of destruction. What do you need from me? Everything. Wong placed a small recording device on the table. Every document, every conversation, every secret they think you're too broken to use against them. But most importantly, I need you to attend the Vertex merger announcement gala next week. We believe that's when they'll finalize the terms of their larger scheme. And if I refuse? Then I'll have no choice but to proceed with the evidence we already have. Your husband will go to prison, your career will be over, and the real architects of this fraud will likely walk away unscathed. He paused, letting the words sink in. But I don't think you'll refuse. Because you're not just angry anymore, you're awakened. And an awakened woman is the most dangerous force in nature. I stared at my reflection in the polished silver tea service, seeing in it the ghost of who I used to be and the shadow of who I was becoming. The choice before me wasn't really a choice at all, it was destiny, written in the language of betrayal and vengeance. My phone buzzed, a message from Green. Board meeting moved up. 1 hour. Bring everything. I looked back at Wong, feeling the last vestiges of my old self slip away like smoke. I'll need guarantees. Immunity. Protection. Already arranged. He stood, straightening his intentionally rumpled suit. The question is, Ms. Chen, are you ready to become the weapon we need you to be? I rose as well, smoothing my skirt with hands that no longer trembled. No, Mr. Wong. The question is, are they ready for what I'm about to become? As I left the plaza, stepping into the harsh autumn sunlight, I felt the weight of the recording device in my bag like a loaded gun. The time for tears and shock had passed. Now was the time for calculation, for precision, for the kind of cold-blooded execution that would make the wolves who had tried to devour me choke on their own ambitions. The game had changed, and so had I. Let them think me broken, it would make their destruction all the more satisfying. The Vertex Merger Gala transformed the Metropolitan Museum's Temple of Dender into a glittering maze of champagne flutes and calculated deception. As I ascended the grand staircase, each click of my Louboutins against marble echoed like a countdown to detonation. The black Givenchy dress I'd chosen was armor crafted of silk and spite, its deep V-neck and precise tailoring a reminder that sometimes the most devastating weapons come wrapped in beauty. The recording device Wong had given me pressed against my ribs beneath the dress, its presence both a comfort and a curse. Like Schrodinger's cat, I existed in a state of simultaneous danger and safety, protected by federal oversight yet never more vulnerable to the wolves circling ever closer. Eric was already there, his presence a fresh wound in my psyche. The blonde from Wong's photographs stood at his side, her red dress a slash of arterial blood against the sandstone walls. Watching them together, I felt something crystallize inside me, not jealousy, but a cold, clinical fascination with my own capacity for emotional detachment. Sophia. James Green materialized at my elbow, his smile sharp as broken glass. You look absolutely lethal tonight. How appropriate, I replied, accepting the champagne he offered. The irony of his word choice almost made me laugh. If he only knew how right he was. The board was impressed with your presentation this afternoon, he continued, steering me toward a quieter corner. Though some of the projections seemed innovative. I took a deliberate sip of champagne, letting the moment stretch. Innovation is what you hired me for, isn't it, James? Finding patterns others miss? His hand tightened imperceptibly on my arm. Speaking of patterns, I had an interesting lunch with Marcus Wong yesterday. The shock of his revelation rippled through me, but years of high-stakes negotiations had taught me to transform surprise into advantage. Did you? I found my own meeting with him quite illuminating. There, a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. For the first time, I saw fear crack through his practiced facade. You're playing a dangerous game, Sophia. No, James. I'm ending one. I leaned closer, pitching my voice for his ears alone. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out? The elaborate orchestration of Eric's downfall. The carefully planted blonde temptress. The engineered gambling debts. It's brilliant, really, using my own husband as the instrument of my destruction. You don't understand what you're dealing with. Actually, I understand perfectly. I turned to face him fully, letting him see the predator I'd become. You needed someone to take the fall when the SEC finally moved on the Henderson deal. Eric was weak, malleable. I was inconvenient. Too smart, too thorough, too likely to spot the irregularities in the merger documents. So you broke him to break me. The truth of my words painted themselves across his face in shades of barely concealed panic. But there was something else there too, a calculation I hadn't anticipated. If you know all this, he said carefully, then you must realize you'll never prove it. The evidence is already in the hands of people far more powerful than you. I smiled, channeling all the cold satisfaction of the last week into the expression. Did you really think Marcus Wong approached me by accident? That my meeting with him wasn't part of a much larger plan? The champagne in his glass trembled slightly. You're bluffing. Am I? I nodded toward Eric, who was now deep in conversation with several Vertex executives. Ask yourself, James, who would make a more valuable witness? The weak-willed husband who took bribes and leaked information? Or the betrayed wife who gathered evidence for months, documenting every conversation, every transaction, every secret meeting? We could protect you, he offered, desperation bleeding through his controlled veneer. There's still time to choose the right side. That's exactly what I've done. I set down my champagne flute, the crystal ringing softly against marble. The difference is, my definition of right isn't measured in offshore accounts and plausible deniability. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with a text from Wong, teams in position. Proceed. The temple's ancient stones seemed to pulse with ancestral power as I moved through the crowd toward the podium where the merger announcement would soon be made. Each step felt predestined, as if the path I now walked had been carved into fate itself. I caught Eric's eye across the room. Something in my expression must have triggered his survival instincts because he took an involuntary step forward. The blonde grabbed his arm, but he shook her off, his face a mask of dawning horror. Sophia, wait. But I was already ascending the podium steps, my heart beating in perfect synchronization with the timer I'd set on my phone. In exactly 3 minutes, Wong's teams would breach the museum's perimeter. In 5 minutes, every electronic device in the room would receive a detailed dossier of evidence I'd spent the week compiling. And in 7 minutes, the carefully constructed empire of lies would collapse like the ancient temple it was housed in. I approached the microphone, feeling the weight of hundreds of eyes upon me. In that moment, I understood something profound about power. It wasn't just about having the right cards, but about knowing exactly when to play them. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying clear and strong through the hallowed space. I'd like to tell you a story about trust, betrayal, and the true cost of corporate corruption. The room held its breath, and in the suspended silence, I felt myself become something entirely new, not a victim, not a pawn, but a force of nature unleashed. The wolves had taught me how to hunt, never realizing they were training their own destruction. Let the slaughter begin. Time crystallized in the temple of Dender as my words hung in the air like suspended daggers. Each face in the crowd reflected a different shade of dawning horror as I methodically dismantled their carefully constructed world of lies. The recording device beneath my dress hummed against my skin, a mechanical heartbeat counting down to their collective destruction. The Henderson merger, I continued, my voice carrying through the ancient stones, was never about corporate synergy or market optimization. It was about something far more primitive: power, greed, and the arrogance of men who thought they could play gods with other people's lives. I locked eyes with James Green, watching the blood drain from his face as I projected the first set of documents onto the massive screen behind me. Wire transfers. Meeting logs. Surveillance photos. Each piece of evidence another nail in the coffin of his empire. The beautiful thing about betrayal, I said, allowing a smile to play across my lips, is how it clarifies things. When you strip away the pretense of loyalty, when you peel back the veneer of trust, what remains is pure truth. And truth, ladies and gentlemen, is what we're dealing in tonight. Eric started moving toward the podium, his face a masterpiece of conflicting emotions. But before he could reach me, the FBI teams breached the perimeter. The chaos that erupted was almost balletic, men in tactical gear streaming through every entrance, their movements choreographed with military precision. Sophia, please, Eric's voice cracked as 2 agents intercepted him. I turned to face him fully, allowing myself one moment to really see the man I had loved. He looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of his exposed duplicity. The blonde was already being led away in handcuffs, her red dress a streak of accusation against the sandstone walls. Did you ever love me? The question escaped before I could stop it, one last echo of the woman I used to be. With everything I am. His eyes held mine, and for the first time in weeks, I saw no calculation there, only raw truth. That's what made me such a perfect weapon against you. Real love is the sharpest blade they could have chosen. The truth of his words carved fresh wounds into my psyche, but I was beyond bleeding now. I had transformed my heart into a fortress, my soul into a weapon. His confession was nothing more than confirmation of what I had already become. James Green tried to make a break for it, but Wong's teams had every exit covered. As they cuffed him, he shouted over his shoulder, "You think this makes you powerful? You've just proven you're exactly what we made you." His words struck a chord of truth I hadn't wanted to acknowledge. In becoming their destruction, had I also become their creation? The cold calculation, the strategic manipulation, the willingness to sacrifice everything for victory, these were their tools, their weapons. I had learned to wield them with devastating efficiency, but at what cost to my own humanity? The next hour passed in a blur of federal agents, evidence collection, and the systematic dismantling of one of Wall Street's most intricate corruption schemes. I gave my statement with mechanical precision, each word another brick in the wall between who I had been and who I had become. Later that night, I stood alone in my office at Morgan Stanley, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The investigation would take months to fully unravel, but the major players were already in custody. The SEC had enough evidence to ensure long sentences for everyone involved. I had won, completely and irrevocably. So why did victory taste so much like ash? I caught my reflection in the window, a woman forged in betrayal's fire, tempered by revenge, honed to a lethal edge by the very forces that had tried to destroy her. The soft-hearted financial analyst who had trusted in love and justice was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous, a woman who understood that true power comes not from trust, but from the ability to shatter it. My phone buzzed with a text from Wong. Board wants to meet tomorrow. They're offering you Green's position. Of course they were. I had proven myself to be exactly what Wall Street valued, brilliant, ruthless, unencumbered by conventional morality. I had become the perfect corporate predator, and they wanted to reward me for it. I walked to my desk and picked up the frame that held my favorite photo of Eric and me in Bali. We looked so happy, so innocent. I traced his face through the glass, remembering the man I had loved, wondering if he had ever truly existed or if he had always been a carefully crafted illusion. The glass cracked beneath my fingers, a spider web of fractures distorting our frozen smiles. Blood welled from a small cut, bright as truth against my pale skin. I watched it drip onto the stark white of my desk calendar, marking this day as the end of one life and the beginning of another. Mrs. Chen. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. The press is requesting a statement about tonight's arrests. I pressed my finger to the cut, letting the sharp pain ground me in this moment of metamorphosis. Tell them. I paused, tasting the words before speaking them into existence. Tell them that sometimes the most dangerous creature in the room isn't the wolf in sheep's clothing, but the sheep who learn to hunt. I turned back to the window, my reflection now overlaying the glittering cityscape like a prophecy. The woman staring back at me was neither victim nor villain, but something far more complex, a survivor who had learned to thrive in the darkness, a phoenix risen not from ashes but from shattered glass. The night stretched out before me, full of possibilities both terrible and exhilarating. I had lost everything I thought I wanted, only to gain everything I never knew I could become. The price of transformation had been steep, but standing here at the pinnacle of power, I finally understood the truth. Some women are not broken by betrayal, they are completed by it. Let the world beware of what they had created in me. The game wasn't over, it was merely changing players. And this time, I would write the rules.